Yeah.
And I think, the other challenge there is that, look, I tried to have an unsuccessful conversation with some of our sort of leadership, just pointing out that, like, when you kind of cry into your pillow of Facebook,
Nah, that's a no-go.
You're inevitably, just because of the concision required in that format, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to have a nuanced, long conversation, right? Or even just, you're not going to write, for the most part, you're probably not writing like an essay on the topic that you're referring to. And so inevitably you're going to leave stuff out, and you're probably going to alienate people. The example I used was with TMT thing, not that we're going to talk about politics, but, Haleakala, Mauna Kea, you've got people on both sides of those sort of arguments and ideologies who are both right.
Yeah.
And you also have people who are both really, really wrong.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to just take little zingers or little one-liners and like stand on them and like, this is absolutely the way it is. So there's a lot of gray area. There's a lot of nuance.
These are complex issues.
Right. So it's easier said than done to kind of
100%,
in a format like this, avoid the temptation to just be like, we're being governed by the mayor of Whoville.
Yeah. Do me a quick favor, and I want to get into that, but can you shut that door behind you?
Not that I'm referring to any particular governor or municipality.
Thank you. Well, here's one that
just
I think
the mayor of Whoville.
Here's what I think we can agree on and maybe give people advice, and that's whether you're in the real estate industry or you're a doctor. I don't care what profession you're in. If it is kind of a independent contractor type of profession, is don't use Facebook or Instagram as your pulpit of politics with 140 characters to really explain what you represent.
Yeah.
You muddy the waters. No one has ever changed their mind by reading
right.
a quick 2-sentence thing on politics, and you just alienate. It causes division. At the end of the day, it causes more harm than good. And when you see that, I try not to feed into the fire as far as commenting.
It's interesting when those platforms are used for business. Because I think when we don't, it's sort of like walking into a giant room of people and grabbing a microphone and just saying, like,
I got something to say.
Exactly. Like, I had the most awesome fish tacos last night, you guys. Here's a picture. It's like, without considering, like, look, hey, if you're in the group of guys that you surf with every morning, or if you're at whatever your book club, or if there's some social group that exactly who you're talking to, and there's some expectation about what you're going to say, and there's the sort of social rules of like, you can go this far but not that far. Yeah. Well, that's radically going to change what you do and don't say.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think what the mistake that people make is not actually talking about politics. It's about not considering who they're talking about politics to. Yeah. Right? So what we don't do is, like, we don't make enough Facebook groups, or even private groups, or, and create a culture of, like, sustained conversation. Yeah. There's a lot of, like, I posted this and then 100 people went in there, were like, right on, or like, you suck, or whatever. And it's like, that's not conversation. That's just like clicks and, weird banter. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
No, I mean, there's great points. And I feel like in the age that we're in, there's huge pros and there's huge cons. One of the cons being this kind of snap way of doing things, and it's very flash. Like, I think this, and that's great. It's not right. It's like, all right, that's what takes. You think, but it's not how you think. I really want to know how you think, because I can disagree with you, but if you've kind of done your research and you're, or at least open, or kind of have a good thought process, then all right, we can explore this further, and we can learn from each other. And all right, so that's one of the negative aspects, but one of the positive aspects of not even so much social media, but I'd say internet in general, is you have less influence, less money, less pressure from,
Sure. Like I just started reading Thank You for Being Late, Friedman's new book, and he tells a story about his parking attendant was a blogger, from Ethiopia, and like And he's having this epiphany, realizing, wait, weirdly, I'm now competing with the guy who's taking my parking ticket,
Yeah.
and he wants to discuss it. And he goes on to tell this great story about how he helped him with his blog, and he helped him realize, they had basically an interesting exchange. But that's exactly right. Basically almost zero resources, right? Just literally like me and my words.
Yeah.
And have some evolution and some conversation, and now
it's a whole new
an
marketplace.
audience. And I mean, it's really true.
Yeah. It allowed there to be scale for pretty much anybody who has internet access. You can make your own television show, your own brand.
Right.
That causes some flood to the market and some saturation, but the cream's going to rise to the top. And
For
you
sure.
can get noticed if you have the talent.
In a really weird way, the sort of ubiquity of access, like now this guy on the street, like everyone can do it, strangely is making it harder. Like look at web design is a great example where
it's a game changer.
Everyone can do it.
Yep.
Right? It's super easy now.
Yep.
And weirdly, that's made it harder. Like we were in this place of, it's such a huge tool to be able to have in-house web design.
WordPress is a nightmare, but you jump from WordPress to Squarespace, and all of a sudden you look like a genius.
Right, and truth be told, Squarespace is one of
many
very simple outlets that will kind of shortcut a lot of the dumb design decisions that get made in the world. Right, so. I mean, just that, and yes, it's ultimately
it's innovation, but it's all right. Well, now you can't rest on your morals. Now, how do you go to the next phase? You always got to be ahead of the puck. So even when people were doing the web design, they were competing on some other level, whether it be let's get market share of the yellow pages, and then all of a sudden, oh man, these yellow pages is the dying breed. So now, web design is almost like a dying breed, but they're gonna find a way to make what Squarespace is doing obsolete because there's money in it.
Well, and what it sure seems to me that curve that I'm having a trouble, really clarifying, that difficulty that somehow refined by all this access is really showing up in words. Like, it's not so much about, I mean, yes, there's a ton of value in good design. I mean, and I'll extend that through all kinds of stuff, not just the look and feel of a web page.
Yeah.
But all at the level of the web page, it all starts with the words that are coming out of your mouth, like the words that you are using. The words on the page. Yep. I mean, like there's innumerable sites.
A beautiful thing. I think that's where lies the silver lining, right?
And that's also what's getting harder, right? It's getting harder to.
Yes and no, right? Because here's how I see it, and feel free to disagree. Is I see the old way of being a salesperson is dying really quick, and that's a good thing because what's really attractive to people is that authenticity, and that's why I'm guessing you hate the show. I love the show, but $1 Million Listing, like you get to know those people as people, and they're not a suit and tie. You see what's underneath the suit and tie, right? You see them how they live for fun, and
as far as anyway.
Well, obviously it's a fake version of reality TV. I get that, but what they're not trying to put on a mask as much. So when they tell jokes, that's their sense of humor. When they how they interact with clients, they're being themselves. I'll give them credit for that. Right. So really what I'm getting at is, can you be yourself and still make a good living when it used to be as a salesperson, just be a chameleon. If this is a high energy person, you become a high energy person.
Could you say that again, but with more energy?
Yeah, exactly, right? Like mirror who you're talking to. I don't think that's with the way the internet's kind of given a platform. It's be yourself, and then a little bit more of law of attraction there. And you don't have to try to be something you're not. And I really like the kind of outlet that's given. So it just creates a few different avenues. And if you're persistent and you work really hard and you're out there getting your name out as much as you can, or at least just working harder than the next guy, it should kind of level itself out.
I wonder if that's true in the real world. Like, I kind of think
yes and no. I mean, there's talent involved.
I think also what's changing is the story about sales, right?
Yeah.
Like the culture of, I think that realization that actually if you're just yourself and you're kind of like self-aware and you get in touch with yourself and you're able to articulate why you like something, then apparently that's really enrolling and people like that. And by golly, they're going to buy stuff from you.
It has to work in concert with you being the best at your job.
Right.
Yeah. It's one without the other is there's no substance.
It's probably always been the case. I just think the way we're coming to realize it, and also the reach that we now have is making those realizations like telescopic, right? They're just happening so much faster.
Exactly. So if you went to go buy a house 30 years ago, you couldn't go on Facebook and really learn that person's life story and how many kids they have and the kind of house they live in.
Yeah,
so everyone kind of like has a microscope in everybody's life.
Yeah.
And so you can't fake it anymore at that level. You could really think, hey, Jim, who sold me the car, is a standout guy. And then at home you see him like drinking a beer, watching a Patriots game. And you're like,
it's weird. Right. I mean, Friedman talks about this too. It's almost like 2007 was this massive turning point.
Nothing against the Patriots, by the way.
Why?
Nothing against the Patriots.
Why? What do you mean? What was the turn? Is that where they started?
I just made fun of them. Yeah, but go ahead.
It's like, iPhone, all of these different technologies, all this stuff comes out. But I'm just thinking about when we started the company, it was 2008, and even we.
Oh, by the way, maybe we introduce you. Oh. I don't know. That's a decent idea. I mean, who cares?
It is a show.
It's a show. Hey, I have a guest on. His name's Matt Beall. He does something with computers or vacuum sales.
That's a really good idea,
right?
You know what? I was listening to speaking of podcasts, I was listening on the way over here to one of our brokers in charge. I run a real estate company, by the way.
Okay. Yeah.
One of our brokers in charge on the phone with multiple different agents, and I thought, it's just this recording. Like, if you just had it's almost like Jerry Seinfeld, comedians in cars or something. Like, if you just had like brokers on the phone, it would just be. I mean, especially the level of the brokers in charge, the stuff that they deal with is just like,
it's
hilarious.
astronomical.
Like the words coming out of her mouth, I'm just like, wow, you have to say that. Okay, got it. Like powerful stuff. Yeah. So you're introducing me. I'm Matt. I'm Matt Beall.
Yeah.
Claude, what's your name? What are their names again?
All right, let me frame it like this.
I don't like the way he's looking at me.
Kevin, camera number one, Kevin. He's intense. He doesn't like to mess around.
Devil eyes.
Yeah. Let me frame it as this way: is like the audience I'm trying to reach is trying to give an outlet that's a little bit more localized, because you can go on YouTube or watch CNN and learn everything about people living in a system of kind of that mainland, big city type of setup.
Yeah.
But the island's a little bit more unique, not completely unique, but our day-to-day doesn't resemble kind of growing up in LA. It resembles something a little bit different, but I think kind of the illusion out there is that you don't have to wake up and get to work and put in your 10 to 12 hours. These guys just roll out of bed, go to the beach, surf, and then go home, get a coconut off a tree, and then
we don't do that.
I wish
you don't have coconuts.
Yeah. Just that it's the fantasy of Hawaii, right?
Right.
But there's a counterculture within that of people who are successful businessmen. So part of the stories I want to learn how.
It's interesting. I'm not sure a counter is the word I'd use, like counterculture, but there was definitely like we're in the struggle of really articulating our value to Oahu, where it's some of the agents over there put it there very, very specifically. Like, look, if you're sitting in your car and you're stuck in traffic and you're trying to get home to the west side and it's like Thursday and you're sweating, you're not thinking about like Honu and paddleboarding and like life and lifestyle and any of that. You're thinking about like, I just need someone that's an adult to get the job done and make sure I get the best mortgage rate and the best price for my house. And, and it's all about efficiency. And, those values are very, very different than like, on the neighbor islands, I always say like people who get it, like kind of what you're talking about. It's like,
that's very true. Good point.
Little stuff, but it's like things that you have to. The people always ask me like, well, why do you drive a truck? I'm like, because I live on the North Shore of Kauai. You have like that's something you have to get.
There's utility.
Like, yes. So anyway, I mean, messaging and those two values, I think it's not fair to say there's only two value systems, but there's definitely a distinct like romance and kind of a.
Well, and then how do we walk that line? Because I think not in all cases, but in most cases, people move to Hawaii to kind of find that balance of, all right, I have this fantasy of living by the ocean and enjoying the beach life, quality of life, outdoors, health.
Right.
Those are all important aspects, and I think you should have that whether you live in Hawaii or live in Kansas City.
Right.
You know, you got to focus on that. It's balance. So I think people would assume that Hawaii is a little bit on the left side of that pendulum, and maybe New York City's on the right side of that pendulum. But really, you got to find it wherever you're at. You know, it
Right.
shouldn't matter. And
For
so,
sure.
even though we're in Hawaii, I
Right.
got to find a way to stay
There's
at the top
always
of my game.
wherever you go, there you are.
Exactly.
Right.
So,
and I think here, because it is such a transient community, there's that, you know, like we had an interview recently, and the candidate had only been on Kauai for 6 months.
yeah.
Which is like, you know, red flag.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
It's like
6
okay,
months is your
right.
cutoff time.
It's
yeah.
like it's a little bit like, okay, what you know. And then the next question is, inside of, you know, however long, maybe longer, there's always this like, are you running from something, or what's going
exactly.
on? You know,
Yeah,
you're looking
exactly.
around like,
What happened?
right, exactly. And I think that transient, it's interesting where, you know, especially in a relationship culture, that transient kind of vibe sets us all up to not really form intimate relationships with people that we don't know.
Absolutely.
Because it's a little bit like, well, you could leave
am I
at
gonna
any
see
minute.
you? Yeah,
Right,
exactly. Yeah, what happened to
And so-
Harry?
right.
Nah, he went
Right,
back,
exactly. And then same in like hospitality, right? Where
Yeah.
people come and go. Then there's people that you see more often, and
Yeah.
they're sort of like the next layer in the onion,
Yeah.
you know, like they start
the
to get
next layer on
known.
the totem pole.
Right.
Yep.
And then they get closer, and then like, oh yeah, I kind of know that guy. Like
Yeah.
he's around, and you now these like levels of sort of service and shaming change. Like you have to be nicer just a
Yeah.
little bit, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's kind of like,
It's a small town. at the
right,
end of the day.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like let you in, but not too nice. And then there's, I think weirdly, as you get deeper, the rules
change a little
change radically.
Yeah.
You know, it's all, I mean, deeper is
Yeah, no,
not quite the way to put it, but,
Exactly.
yeah.
It's just kind of this social layering and different levels to it that you find in probably any tight knit community
and a small town.
in a
Right.
small town. Yeah.
Where everybody knows everybody.
Yep.
They're
Exactly.
they're all
Well, let me tie that in with a little bit of, I want to get to know your story, but all right, so say you kind of mentioned like, all right, you're having a debacle, say you grew up on the mainland, and for whatever reason, you either want to run away from that problem or improve on that problem by coming to Hawaii. If you're listening, you're on the mainland, like, man, I
Red
just,
flag.
yeah, exactly, red flag. I love that SNL skit. Red flag.
there's like a cursor floating over your head.
You know, it's not necessarily.
If you're out there.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I could say honestly, I was doing well where I grew up, Las Vegas, and I had a great life and nothing really to escape from. But I was escaping from boredom or status quo.
Right.
I said I want to have a little bit more adventure in my life because I always lived within the box and, you know, buy a car, get a mortgage, have kids, get married, die,
Right.
Retire, die.
Married,
And it
retired,
just seemed
go out white knuckle
like
on the
in
wheel.
in a in a flash. I was just like, that's too predictable, and I like taking risks. So,
Yeah.
or I at least got to put myself in a position to take a risk and grow. And I moved out here, and it was really a growing experience. All that to kind of say, if somebody
What
has
year
adversity,
was that?
2008.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
right in the middle of the
Right.
world was coming to the
Yeah.
end. I mean, it was
Especially from
August
Vegas of all
2008.
places,
Yeah. Right.
Wow.
And everyone said, yeah, you know, you'll be back in 6 months. Verbatim, everyone, hey, I'll see you in a year kind of thing.
It's interesting.
Yeah. And we'll get into how I planted my flag and all that. I want to hear your story too. But even if you're going through a tough time and it is kind of an outlet or an escape, you got to leverage that to your advantage because you only get a couple of these moves. So don't do it to procrastinate or be lazy, but use it as kind of a catalyst to create the life that you want to create. And if no better place to live, really, if that's what's
Yeah.
for you.
Right.
But don't run away from the problem and set up new problems for yourself out here. Create a path
Please
of
don't do that.
success. Yeah, exactly. Be a good member to society and productive and healthy, and then find that balance of not just going to the beach every day, but also contributing through your whatever talent you have.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, there's obviously a lot packed into that. And I
Yeah.
think we
And you're wrong.
and I hate that idea. It's interesting that story about people saying you'll be back in 6 months. When I moved to Hawaii, I worked for a guy who ran a hotel, and he grew up in the British Virgin Islands, and he said, you're making a huge mistake.
Yeah.
And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you'll get spoiled. And I was like, what? I was like 20 at the time.
Yeah. Where were you from before that?
I grew up in Georgia, and I was in Montana.
Yeah.
And he says, well, you never will be able to live anywhere else. You'll be totally spoiled.
You're ruined.
And I was like, whatever, bro.
You're done. Yeah.
And I got to say, he's pretty. He's pretty. It's like, man, it would be.
Life's
be a lot of check boxes I'd have to hit.
Yeah, well, life's about progression, right? You always want to take steps forwards, not steps back. And so what's the next step forward from here? I'll go anywhere. I'm not committed to Maui, but you got to show me something better. Yeah. And I've yet to run into it. I assume you're feeling the same.
I think for me, Hawaii it's a lot of, and this is just for me, but I think obviously for some other people, you really are put into a place where you examine what matters to you and what's important to you and what your values are, and
because there's space for that.
Yes, and sometimes not. Sometimes it's just part of the culture and it's like forced.
Yeah,
but you definitely. I mean, even just as something as simple as like the small island where you kind of have to be yourself because.
There's less distractions.
On it,
if you're somewhere where there's a lot going on, sports, museums, restaurants, all that stuff, you get to just feed that and keep the machine going.
I see what you're saying. Machine. Right? Right. So like in a place like Vegas,
you don't have to be introspective.
You don't have
just
to think
keep
about
going.
quality.
Yeah,
right?
you just keep plugging along.
Interesting.
Something a little bit quieter, say as rural areas, nature that Hawaii brings. It gives you a little bit of space to really think. All right, what's bigger than me? Let me get outside of myself.
And these basic things, these fundamental things, I mean like basic, like air quality, basic, or, you know what I mean? Right? Or like, or how the light is in the winter, or,
that's big,
really fundamental things start having all this meaning and they matter, and that you're tracking their quality, and then you notice them elsewhere. Like, and so it's sort of like it's a maturity, but I don't know how better to describe it. And I know I might just be geeking out on my own stuff, but I do think people are, whether they realize it or not, are in that inquiry here.
Yeah.
And I'd be really curious to hear the stories and perspectives of, like people that grew up on a neighbor island, went away to school in a particularly, large metropolitan environment. Not like, I went to Eugene or something, but like, I went LA,
into a big pond.
Right. Yeah. And what that experience was and how it, did it.
To me, it's like, it's balance, right? And I talked about this with Rita while she was on the show. And
I watch that.
Yeah, there's some good stuff in there. There's some gems. But kind of getting outside of yourself, growing your skin by adversity. Like, I never want to be comfortable. Like, Maui's this really comfortable place, and it's just like, if I wanted to, I could just do what I'm doing right now, continue on. But I'm a type of person, and I'm assuming you're kind of the same, of just like, all right, I've made it to level 8. How do I get to level 9? And how do I become a little bit more uncomfortable? And
maybe, I think so.
Are you a little bit more content? I'm
definitely content.
Have you always been that way? Or are you finding it now? Because you're on the back 9. I mean, you're old.
I'm basically, if you look, look at me, I'm like a fucking Cialis commercial.
Yeah. Riding your road bike down the street.
After this, I'm going to go on a cruise.
Yeah, exactly.
What was the question again? You were saying,
have you always been content? I mean,
I think at some point in my life, I hit the like get over yourself kind of wall where it's like, things are pretty good.
Yeah,
like it's not so bad.
What phase was that? I mean, are you talking 20s, 30s, 40s?
It must have been in my 20s because it's interesting. I don't think I had much of a future for a long time. I wasn't thinking. When I say that, I don't mean like I was.
You were whimsical?
Yeah, I was whimsical. I wasn't thinking about the future. I was just like, whatever.
In the moment,
it's great. You know? But even then, and I wouldn't change any of that. And some of it you could chalk up to maturity and like totally predictable things that people do in their youth. But some of it, it's sort of like the light bulb went off for me, and it's like, you know, I don't want to get stuck in a world of like always having to change my circumstances to make them better. You know what I mean?
So then what?
It's certainly not at the expense of my current circumstances.
Yeah, well,
right?
no,
Like
yeah.
what's going
I wouldn't
on
say
now.
at the
It's
expense of your current circumstances, but do you never felt like in a business aspect of like, all right, I've hit 10 million now. Next year, I want to do 15, 20 million.
Never.
Yeah, that's like, I mean, I applaud that. I wish I was more that way.
It's so weird, and people. I know it's strange, and people always like. Even we hit $1 billion, and it's such a big deal, and it's. I mean, it's like we did 990 one year. Like that was pretty cool too.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's I not to like. I don't want to. Fail to acknowledge it. It's a ton of work, and like all those BIC calls. I mean, it's so much work, and there's so much packed into it.
Yeah.
I'm not the like color by numbers guy. I'm not looking at it like, oh, okay, well now I want to do blah blah blah. Like I'm head down.
You're not a goal setter kind of thing.
I don't do big outside in goals. I never have, and I know it's weird, and people freak out about it. But
no, I think how I kind of view this is like. A diet that works for you might be a diet that doesn't work for me. Totally. You can't just
diet and exercise. Is a great
you can't just
example.
read one book and be like, oh, I'm going to apply that to my life and it's going to work. You got to find out what works for you, and that's kind of.
And the other key thing about that analogy is that knowing it doesn't mean anything. Yeah, it's like who doesn't know that diet and exercise are like how you sleep better and lose weight, and like
you know the answer to the test. But it's
you have to be
the
that.
habit and the ritual of
those
it.
Things, right?
Exactly.
So that to me is way more important. That's what I'm consumed by is thinking about, how do we be better? How do we, so then, and that's I've got, I guess, goals in that regard, but those are so abstract. It's not like,
I'm finding and I'm learning, and like, if I'm doing goals, it's more of the practice of writing down on paper to kind of reaffirm, I got to focus on that. It's not so much because I want something, like I want to be a better father, and I just feel like it's one thing to think it, but it's one thing to kind of take it down to pen to paper. There's something like evolutionary about it that almost makes me think about it a little more through the day.
Yeah. Have you heard, I'm just changing the subject, but did you ever hear about, I should look up the author, but Afformations?
I know of Afformations. I didn't know it was a book.
Not Afformations like the classic, but Afformations.
Okay.
So basically, it's this guy, he sort of coined this word, who basically what he's saying is if you take the normal affirmation, like, and I love that I'm just now ripping this guy off in your podcast.
Well, that's
you take the normal affirmation, which is like whatever, I make a lot of money, or I'm so successful, or like abundance comes to me, or pick one.
Yeah.
Immediately, what happens is, like scientifically, what happens is your brain starts playing all of the feedback loops that are counter to that.
Absolutely.
Now, both happen. So you do both. You look for evidence of your whatever, your abundance or your wealth, but you also immediately play your story about how you're an idiot and like it really is all your fault, and like you really don't know what you're doing, and like everything is going to come crashing down on you, and like you know what I mean, like that same trigger starts both of those paths. So now you've got this subconscious like loop going on where it's like, how is it so hard for me to make money? And and what he suggests is, and this is where he coins this sort of, affirmation, is frame it like a question. Yeah. So that you get your mind thinking about one target. Yeah. So he would say like, why is it so easy for me to make money? Yeah. And then he's like, immediately when you say that, your brain starts going into, well, I don't know. I mean, well, why is? Well, you're real, like now it's all finding evidence for this very specific, press play on this thought. Exactly. That I think is really fun. It's like it's kind of cheeky and it's cool, but if you do it, you actually go through this like, oh yeah, you start looking for the 100%. Solution. I've heard that before. I haven't applied it, but no, it's little things. Yeah. I mean, it's like start with something really obvious, and then you start to get it. It's cool because and I think back to current circumstances, it's like you start getting way more present. Yeah. Right, because you're now thinking about like, well, why am I such a good dad? Exactly. Well, I mean, look at this beautiful house. And it's and that stuff I think is often left out because it's like everyone's going somewhere. Exactly. And it's interesting. I mean, I grew up in a competitive
nature kind of arena, and that's kind of why if I'm going to do something, I want to be the best at what I do, but that doesn't lead to happiness. So I'm trying to find a way to pull from different aspects of psychology, or this is really a science, and it's almost like how would I approach diet is how I should approach my daily habits, my weekly habits,
right.
and expand that on out and almost kind of work backwards from there.
Right.
But that's me, and I'm finding that the more I talk to more successful people, it's like there's such thing as talent, and they're gonna find a way. They don't think about their goals as much because they're just doing it, and then it kind of comes from there. But that's not for everybody.
It could also be like, look, I'm aware too that I might be actually
you're gonna buy on your looks. That's it. Yeah.
No, I might be actually learning to set goals. I'm definitely learning to write better. And I think that's part of it. Like even you're just talking about something about writing it down, like that sense of like, the vulnerability that's required in like sitting down and.
Do you do like journal practices and stuff?
I do,
like
but
that?
not super regularly. Like I go in and out of it. Like sometimes I come on really strong. I used to journal I had a journal that was everything that worked.
Yeah.
Right. Like that was super fun. And it creates a sort of business introspection because I got into this thing where I would do it on Sundays and then I would look back at my week and try and think about what I did. And so I started looking at my calendar and I'd be like, I forgot to schedule that. I didn't put that one call in because I know I talked to so-and-so. And then I got this app called Phone View, which basically this is super nerdy, but I plugged my phone and downloaded all of my calls for the week. And I took all of the ones that were 10 minutes or more and I just basically dragged them onto my calendar. Dude, that was like, I sat there for a while, like sort of gaping, looking at a month's worth of calls. First of all, how much time I spend on the phone is unbelievable. But secondly, like you can see I did every call that longer than 10 minutes. So you could just see who's dominating your time, it was intense.
That's intense.
But it was also great because it the practice started, one, it set me up to just be a little more boundaried, basic
it's like
stuff.
Taking an analytical approach to your day.
But then I got into really, I talked to so-and-so and that went really well. And then that, you want to do more of that.
Reinforce it.
So anyway, I don't know how we got onto that, but Afformations.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway, I was saying, I think I might be becoming a better goal setter. I think a lot of my resistance is, this is self-awareness with Matt Beall. A lot of my resistance has been that kind of sort of avoidant, you don't tell me what to do, man.
Yeah.
And I don't, and I also really resent, especially in a sales environment, the sort of hierarchical, no, well, Rob Hassan's number 3, Matt. How come you're not number 3?
Yeah.
If you just tried a little bit harder, you would have been number 3 or number 2.
Well,
even.
that's a bad rabbit hole to go down to because you're never
so stupid.
Yeah.
It's okay,
it never ends. That game never ends.
And I think that's the whole sort of destiny of business is trying to figure out how to do the job and do it well without turning everything in your universe into a unit. You know what I mean? Into especially human beings.
Well, all right. So let me get into it from this aspect because one thing that I don't do, and I forget what the book was, but kind of some people are driven through the number aspect and some people are driven through kind of that intricate how it makes you feel, or almost like fear of rejection, people pleaser side of things of wanting to do right.
Right.
I'm pretty abstract. When I look at my sales, I don't go, where do I rank? But am I being the best at what I can possibly do? Have I put up all the time, the homework, the classes? Right. Am I on top of my game for the sake of quality versus quantity? That's what drives me to kind of push it a little bit further. I never really had a desire to be top 10 realtor unless it would have to be a byproduct of being the best at what I do. I'm not going to really chase it. It should come that way because you should be in the, it's the chicken and the egg there. But so then you as a business person and you finding contentment, at least that's what I'm hearing. Where does the drive come from, or where does the ambition come from? I mean, what's the why behind this? I mean,
denial, stupidity. No, just kidding.
Self-abuse.
I think, I mean, look, some of it kind of depends on what you're talking about, the facets of the business. My answer to that as a salesperson, for example, or even a small sort of project developer, or different sort of iterations of my work world would be different.
Yeah.
There's a lot of there's a lot of like kind of following my nose,
Yeah.
and pushing all in on like, I think that's really cool,
Yeah.
like,
So there's still
you have to be willing.
enthusiasm there.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. I mean, there's got to be something that gets you
totally.
out of bed every day and forces you to work.
Yeah, I mean, there's
all day.
also a growing list of
Yeah.
stupidities.
Yeah.
But the possibility stuff is definitely out there. Sometimes in the company, there's sort of a wax and wane of like, as the company grows, and as a lot of my work is often, whether I intend it or not, but it's basically business development, right? Like you're selling something, you're talking to somebody about something, or you're doing some sort of acquisition, or you're getting a listing, or it's something like that. And the acquisition of all that stuff, I mean, you go out and you do all that, and you do it repetitively, and a lot of the values, a lot of the conversation is very much the same. And over time, I sort of feel like the waiter at the restaurant that's just like trying to make the specials sound like they're unique. And even though this is like my 50th time saying the exact same words, and I'm like, it's super good. It's like lavender, and it's got like it's rubbed on
very
there,
aromatic,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, so there's some of that where it just it bogs you down, but the scale and the scope of stuff that I get to play with, and like what we get to do, and the ideas we get to just totally try and have, like starting a podcast, or all those kinds of things. That's super fun. I love that, and I know there's way more of that stuff. It's the business process of like,
well, there's idea and there's execution,
right? And delegating those things so that I can do the classic sort of work on the business more than work in it.
Yeah.
Now that's often easier said than done.
Yeah, absolutely.
I sort of suffer from like a.
Do you have ADD?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, I totally could, but I was going to say I have this. I'm often like delusional about. I think I sell myself short in a weird way, which is that I think that if I can do it, anybody can, which is super dangerous because it turns out that's not true. And then I also, I've really had to learn how to delegate.
Yeah, that's hard. That's way easier said than done.
And the weird part about this, and I'm not sure this is true anymore. I mean, there's some people that might tell you this is absolute hogwash, but for years, I never wanted to be like the asshole that's like, go get me a coffee. You know what I mean? Like I just never, by not telling anyone to do anything, know? And that also doesn't work, especially for people who are like, you hired me, like you should probably tell me what to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like that level of like, oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. So, I mean, that process is ongoing for me. It's like,
do you think a little bit of that character trait is instilled in you because you grinded from the bottom level? And then had to work your way up to the top.
Because I grew up at the bottom of a lake.
Well, you were in the restaurant industry, as I have been, and that really teaches you humility and how to respect people. So then the last thing you want to turn into is, that guy who's like, "Whoa, where's your this coffee doesn't have 2 packets of sugar and it's just one." I can tell you're fired.
I got stories, man. So I used to work in a casino in Montana, and it was one of those places where
it's a terrible place to work. I don't even know.
One of those places where
right
like
now.
It would get busy. It would get busy on like the 15th and 16th, and then like the 1st and 2nd of the month, and then it would just be basically empty.
Yeah. And
when it was busy, it was like hostile. Yeah. I mean, it was like hostile.
Yeah.
Like just off, and people. I mean, this is, and I was a kid. Like I didn't know. I was just like, whatever. This is great, and I'm after it. And those are interesting stories. And like that, it's one of those situations where the customer is not always right.
No, for sure.
In fact, most of the time they're really wrong. And I think, fast forward, like thinking about answering your question about that motivation and the inspiration as a salesperson. Strangely, I loved making the money. Yeah. And I love the winning part of like doing deals. Yeah. But very quickly what came to like kind of get me most excited was like hanging out with cool people. Yeah. There's some really cool people. And like if you hang with them and their people.
Yeah.
Now it's like the customer apparently is right. Like these are really bright, arrived.
And it's experience. And it's something new and it's fresh. And you're kind of running off of curiosity.
Totally.
But then it feels like you do kind of detract from trying to be stale, because you could have just done real estate sales and just continued on and then sale after sale after sale.
Maybe.
But you were,
I mean, that could have been a little bit of like, it could have been a little bit of, you know, maybe I can't do sales, or like maybe, you know what I mean? That voice of like, maybe I better. I mean, in some ways,
work towards my strengths a little bit more.
Like I hate doing these F&B analogies, but in a way they make total sense, which is like, for a long time, and kind of in some ways still, I'm like the restaurant manager.
Yeah.
Like I don't make as much money as a lot of the people that work in our company.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
but I have a job, you know, and like, and I have, my balance sheet is good. And
is that almost the attraction to the stability though? Or do you like the high highs and low lows?
Not at all. I feel like you like to gamble. It's not at all. It's all about, for me, that what lights me up in that context is way more about like the business wins, putting it together, not being afraid of the puzzle pieces. I love the like sports analogy of the, you know, the pieces on the board, like you know,
the chess match.
I often call Rhonda like the defensive
you
coordinator.
got some Tom Brady's out there, and you're the Bill Belichick.
Totally right. Or at the very least, I'm Belichick or a GM or somewhere in that that thing where it's like, you know, oh, there's that talent. Let's have that contract negotiation. I mean, then there's drafts and there's rookies, and that's for sure.
Yeah,
and that part I definitely
and appreciate. Then therein lies the motivation, and that's the continuum that pushes you on to the next. I mean,
it's hard to say if that's the motivation. It's interesting. I mean, I like the talent management stuff is fun, and it's definitely there's a continuum of skill set. I mean, I'm getting better at it. And it's rare. I mean, it's super rare. Like I'd say there's not a lot of people that do it.
Yeah.
At least that I see in our industry. Just like there actually aren't a lot of salespeople.
Yeah.
It's a similar kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's the thing that like lights me up. Like, yeah, this is what I'm doing. You know, I think the bigger entrepreneurial kind of creation, you know, tinkering with the media stuff that we get to do, and the kind of publishing stuff, and I'm really getting into writing. Like I write. I mean, I looked back. We're in the middle of launching a new site, and they were importing blogs, and I was like, you know, looking at my bio and looking at my page, and because they're all like, they're basically standalone web pages on behalf of brokers and agents. So it's cool. You can like feature listings and have featured carousel blog posts, and it's like it's a website.
Very cool.
And I'm reading like a post from like, you know, 2008 or 2009, and I'm like, oh wow, oh no.
Yeah.
I'm
like, who was that guy?
Like, totally like just so drippy, and like it's just and it's interesting because it's like
you see
that
progress.
Evolution so much, so much.
And you'll look 10 years from now, you'd be like, probably the same thought process.
I hope. I really hope, and it feels like actually even having the self-awareness of like, oh, I'm on this path now.
Yeah.
And then like before, I would have just been like, what do you mean? You just write stuff.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
Now I'm definitely learning that in the written word, these distinctions about, you know, business writing. It's an
art, and you know, a great artist doesn't get to their masterpiece on the first, second try.
Absolutely. And it's
but that process of going through it and going from 1 to 10 and all the milestones in between. I mean, it's that whole body of work that makes the journey so fun.
Right.
Because even when you get to you're writing like how you ever dreamed of writing, you're still gonna kind of want to push it to the next level.
Yeah, and I don't know what that is for me. I don't even have a sense of like, I don't know what that is.
Well, just feeling comfortable in your skin, your craft. And
I mean, I know what I like when I read. I know what I enjoy, and I know what I want to mirror.
But you're probably scratching your own itch a little bit, and it's kind of therapeutic.
Totally. Yeah. I'd like often to my own expense.
Yeah.
You know, totally.
I mean, that's what this podcast is, and you kind of mentioned it before with like, I just enjoy talking to the right people and getting into that circle. For me, it was I just want to have intelligent conversations with some influential people for the state of Hawaii, especially in Maui. Like, you don't have to be in real estate to talk. I want to talk to a successful hotel owner, restaurant owner, charity owner. I mean, whatever it is, if you're the king of your scene, what's your take as far as you want to get into it on? Because I get to follow politics up and down on a mainland scale, but there's really not much outlet for on a local scale. So I guess what would you find as your biggest positive towards Hawaii politics, and what do you see as the biggest negative? And I don't know if that's just in a business or personal or development standpoint, but it is
well,
a
I think
unique.
interestingly, I think they're one and the same.
Okay.
Which is that I think that, and from my limited perspective, could have everything to do with my own personal journey of political awareness, personal involvement. But it strikes me as though the polarization of issues has become sort of like, the best analogy I've used is like the sequoia or the redwood. The way it grows, the way they propagate their seeds, is with fire, right? Yeah. So they grow super tall. They attract lightning. The lightning starts a forest fire. They have thick skin, which plays into the analogy. Everything else on the forest floor burns, but fire is the only thing that can open their seed. Yeah. So fire then starts the seed of a new tree, and that's how they survive. Yeah. I think in a way, like Hawaii politics is kind of going through something like that, and I think the progressive causes that matter to me personally, and that I think matter to people who might even be centrist or left, certainly left. Yeah. In Hawaii, I mean Hawaii's pretty left. Yeah, exactly. Period. But I think the polarization of so many of these issues is creating those sort of seeds of a progressive movement, and more people are getting involved, and that they're involved is awesome. Yeah. They too, all of us, will go through a learning curve and an understanding, and get back to some of that sort of subtlety and nuance and conversation that we all have to have in politics. But the involvement is so key. Yeah. And I think that's both the best and the worst. And the worst part of it is, that polarity then it often extends into these conversations, and so you got a lot of guys who and women who are not informed and who are just like the person with the microphone, and then I think too, let's face it, there's a lot of fake news. I mean, to use the current buzzword, whether that's in the fluff piece in PBN that just came out this morning about me, or in not that data is not true, but it's under the guise of news, and it's sort of a fluff piece, right? Like that same thing extends into really, really legitimate issues, and it's being done by quote independent bloggers who are basically just paid political operatives. Exactly. And that's just super scary.
The shaky foundation of it is when you involve money into clickbait. Right.
Or even just a political agenda, which is the big issue, right? So just, I don't really want to be telling stories about, like everyone's talking about Exxon and how many decades they've been funding the sort of anti-global warming research, which is just like, like what? I mean, it's and imagine what's going to come out. I mean, imagine what's actually going on right now that we have no idea about. Yeah. So that I think it's cool that people are involved.